If you have ongoing exposure to controlling people, it's a virtual certainty that you're going to experience blurry boundaries, which is why I've created the extensive online course called This Is Me, Establishing Boundaries with the Controllers in Your Life. There's a link below that will give you all of the details, and I hope that you would find it therapeutic. One of the things we can safely say about life with a narcissist is there's going to be more than a few episodes of conflict and strain and tension. You're going to find yourself acting and prioritizing in ways that bother them. And rather than saying, well, why don't we sit down and talk about it then to see if we can find a consensus? It's like, there is no consensus. You just have to conform to me. And then as they try to discuss with you some of the strains and differences that are there, somehow or another, whatever problem there is, it's going to be your fault. Narcissists cannot take responsibility for their humanity. I mean, how many times have you heard a narcissist say something like, I really miscalculated, or I did something that was very wrong and I need to make some correction for that, or I want to see if we can revisit what happened between you and me so that we can come up with a better way of doing things. You're not going to hear that, because that would imply that they have a certain amount of humility and an honesty about who they are, and they just can't do that. Let's remind ourselves that narcissists hide behind a mask of the false self. They operate with an alternate reality, which means it's a nice way of saying they make up their own truth about who they are and who you are, regardless of what the actual facts say. They have little to zero introspection. They're very outwardly focused. They don't like to go inside and ask, well, then, how did I contribute to some of our difficulties? And then they must stay in the superior position. Even in the midst of glaringly obvious dysfunction, they still have to be superior. Now, one of the favorite techniques that narcissists use so that they can sidestep responsibility for their problems is they use the technique that we call victim blaming. And basically that means that the recipient of the narcissistic abuse is blamed for the narcissist's bad behavior or attitudes. Go figure. Or it could be that as you have had a struggle, it may not be directly with the narcissist. They'll say, well, what did you do to create the struggle? That's part of that victim blaming as well. Let me give you some ideas as to how that works. Let's suppose that you've had a scenario with the narcissist, and that narcissist went into some very strong and inappropriate anger. Many times they're known to rage and shout and just make life miserable. Other times they have deeply simmering and seething, contemptuous attitudes. But then when you try to talk with them about it, they would say something to the effect like, well, you weren't exactly handling your emotions very well, or none of this would have happened had you done things differently. And so they're the ones with the problems, but you're the one that set the thing up according to that narcissist. Or let's suppose you have another scenario and you're seeking assistance from the narcissist, and you say something like, hey, can you help me out on this? And then that narcissist can say, you just make too many demands. And so you're over here thinking, well, this is a two-way street. It's called a relationship. And it's like, no, whenever you have your side of the relationship that requires needs or requires input from me or sacrifice, then all that means is you're just an impossible person to deal with. They can't go into that direction. Or let's suppose that you set a boundary and you say, I'm not willing to do this, or I need to do this instead, or this is my priority despite what you've told me. They can come along and say, I don't think that's a good idea, or there you are, you're just going to screw everything up again. I can't count on you for anything. And so your attempts to set boundaries can be taken as you making them miserable, when in fact, no, you're the one that made me miserable in the first place. That's their victim blaming. You're the victim of their inappropriate behavior, and then when you decide to do something about it, you're now the problem. Or women, I know that you've had some of these, some of you have had some of this. Let's say that you've been sexually harassed, and you say something about it, and that narcissist can say something like, well, what were you wearing? Or did you say something suggestive? And so here you are on the receiving end of something very inappropriate, and the narcissist loves to take that and say, well, you probably set the whole thing up, didn't you? That's classic victim blaming. Or let's suppose that the narcissist is chronically critical, and you call that narcissist out and say, this is just too much. And so they may say something to the effect of, the problem is you constantly trigger things in me. And if you just would do things right, we wouldn't have this difficulty in the first place. All of that is victim blaming. Now I want you to think, how many times have you been on the receiving end of that kind of technique where they are trying to maintain a superior angle over you? These individuals must stay in that position where they're one up and you're one down. And so in their minds, it's like anytime you want to discuss a problem or a difficulty, the only thing that's a certainty is somehow or another you're at fault. You're the one who's making things miserable. That narcissist, with all of the dysfunction that they have, they're thinking, I'm clean. I'm not the problem, even when there's something glaringly obvious. I've had people that have had an extramarital affair, and it was the spouse's fault because, well, they weren't giving me what I wanted. And so that's victim blaming. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Whew. It'll wear you out, doesn't it? You see, when you are victim blamed, I want you to ask, what does it do to the inside of you? Because I know that it can become a crazy making kind of a thing for you. Certainly, you can feel grossly misunderstood. It's like, all I'm doing is trying to live my life as appropriately as I can. And then when I do something that person doesn't like, I'm the problem, when in fact, no, I'm not. And then sometimes that can prompt you to go into a high justification mode where you feel like you have to explain, no, it's not what you're saying at all. And then you busy yourself defending and rationalizing, which does absolutely no good. Sometimes you just hold your peace all together and you suppress, why bother? I'm just worn out by this person who's constantly looking for ways to sidestep their responsibility by making me responsible for their junk. How are you going to respond? Because I know this can be exasperating, and frankly, I know that there are a lot of you who think, I hate having to be so strategic in these relationships. I'd like for them to just flow much more easily, and I totally get that. But unfortunately, with narcissists, you do have to think, well, what's going to be my strategy, knowing that this tactic is going to be done towards me. And by the way, it's the ultimate gaslighting, them trying to create doubt in you. That's what gaslighting is all about. Let's acknowledge that clearly you are in the presence of a person who's not safe. These individuals just can't simply say, I want to make our conversation something where we can be open and honest with each other. Sometimes they actually have their flying monkeys who are the apologists on behalf of that narcissist, who can say, yeah, I agree with that person over there. And you feel like I'm in the presence of a whole host of people who are not safe. Knowing this, let's also recognize then that you have to be very careful about how far you'll go in discussing your personal feelings and perceptions and needs and rationale. I mean, actually, in healthy relationships, we want to know those kind of things about each other. And we want to have a sense of give and take and a sharing about what's going on the inside. That's not something you can do with a narcissist who is little more than just a game player and a manipulator. That being the case, next, then, you want to give yourself permission to simply stand in your truth. And it may be that you'll remain misunderstood. That person may still say, well, I still think it's your fault that all these things have gone wrong. Well, my truth is, it's not the case. My truth is, I managed myself reasonable, or I made a decision that at the time made good sense. And if you want to do all of that, I'm standing firmly in my truth anyway. And then it's of utmost importance for you to make sure that you are associated with people who do know and understand you and can listen to you and be the support that you need. You need to keep as much distance as possible between yourself and that gaslighting narcissist who does this victim blaming and trying to make you out to be the problem when in fact they're the ones that are creating the very strains that you're trying to get out from under. Now, let's go back to this notion about gaslighting. It's their way of saying, I want you to be dysregulated. I want you to be confused about you. And I want you to ask three questions of yourself. First, am I the initiator of dysfunction in this relationship? And I hope you can say, no, I'm really not. I'm doing the best I can to bring healthy ingredients. The second question I want you to ask is, am I in the presence of a deeply disturbed person? And unfortunately, the deeper a person goes into their narcissism, it also stands to reason, or stands up to logic, that this is a disturbed person, and they're going to bring disturbed elements to the relationship. And then a third question I want you to ask yourself, and that is, do I have integrity? And do I have good character? And I'm hoping the answer is yes. And if the narcissist says, well, I can answer that question, it's no. Well, you know what? I'm not taking counsel from that person. I know what I know about me, and I'm going to stand in that. You know, ultimately, relationships are a two-way street. You have your responsibility that you need to take care of. I have mine, and we'll both have a sense of well-being by each of us responding well to each other. Narcissists, when problems come, they want to make it a one-way street. You're the problem, end of discussion. So they don't take responsibility for their side of the equation at all. That being the case, what we're going to say is to the narcissist, your inability to take responsibility for your glaringly obvious dysfunction is no longer my problem to solve. I'm going to manage myself cleanly, and if you're not able to manage your side of the equation, then that means we're not going to be able to move forward with much of a relationship at all. That's the way it works. I hope that videos such as this give you some good food for thought, and I'm hoping that it can give you an idea of what you're dealing with, and we'll have more videos that come your way. So if you'd like, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell that comes along with it. If you have a need for counseling with somebody who can help you sift out these kind of things and bring an objectivity to you, and I know that can be so important, if there's someone in your immediate area that you could seek out, I would encourage you to do that. Or if you don't have that availability, if you prefer differently, we have a sponsor that has a link below that would take you to online counseling with a whole team of licensed professional experienced counselors that you could choose from. I would strongly encourage that, and I've had good feedback from that. In addition, we have my courses, and these are not just one-off webinars. We have those too, by the way. But the course, This Is Me, which is about establishing boundaries with your controllers, or Free to Be, establishing your identity with controllers. And there are a whole host of videos and pensive questions and all that go along with that. In addition, we have resources for my books, etc. All right, narcissists are known for not taking responsibility for their junk, and they want to try to put it all onto you. It's like, nope. I see it, I'm onto it, I'm over here on Team Healthy. I'm going to live inside my sense of steadiness. I'm going to live with confidence in knowing that I am a person indeed of good character. I'm seeking out peace. I'm not going to get it with that narcissist, but I can find it with myself and with other individuals who know how to do life well. I want you to find your peace.